Today's cocktail has been inspired by a very recent episode of the RUMcast podcast and also by my newfound love of the tea punch. I wanted to revisit one of the simplest cocktails you could ever wish to make, but can actually be so diverse depending on the ingredients that you use. Is it a tiki cocktail? Probably not. Is it a tropical cocktail? I don't think you would call it that, but it does feature in Smuggler's Cove. So today, boys and girls, the whole reason, you've probably said it in the intro, the whole reason this bottle of Falernum is sitting here, we are looking at the corn and oil. I think it's more corn and oil. But I also think that this is going to make a fantastic cocktail for me to deconstruct and kind of play about with on my Sunday night kind of rum show. So that's what's coming up this weekend. Now, there's a couple of things here. If you're very new to the corn and oil, essentially, what is it? Well, it's rum. It's essentially, it stems from Barbados. So the unwritten rule is that it must be Barbados rum. And I'm not going to change that in this video. We are going to use a Barbados rum. We might not do on Sunday, but that's a different day. So we've got that. That's essentially what it is. It's kind of stems from what I kind of gather from, you know, like the planters are looking after all the kind of the sugar cane fields and all that sort of stuff. Kind of stems back to them in those days. It's a very, very old cocktail. But essentially all revolves around Falernum. Now, I could sort of use my own words to explain what Falernum was, but I can't do it any better than what the back of the bottle does. So I'm just going to read you the back of the bottle. Falernum was developed in Barbados in the 18th century. It was first made by blending rum, sugar, lime juice, and certain spices on the sugar estate. And then it goes on to say, a couple of sentences later, in 1890, famed rum blender John D. Taylor refined this recipe into an award-winning one that became essential ingredient in tropical cocktails. And that is what John D. Taylor's Falernum is all about. And I think I'm right in saying it's actually made or blended by Richard Seal these days in Foursquare. And just to give you a couple of other things, this is actually alcoholic. It's 11% ABV, so 22 proof for you guys over in the US. But it is kind of sweet. It's obviously got a little bit more of a booze kick than a syrup, but it has got that sort of sweetness that you would find in pretty much most of those syrups behind me. Now, making a corn and oil really isn't rocket science. In fact, much like a lot of big brands do these days, the recipe is actually on the back of the bottle. And it's got on here ½ an ounce of Velvet Falernum, 2 ounces of RL Seal 10-year-old or Dawley's XO rum. And that's it. So you can see why I'm thinking kind of along the tea punch route, because the tea punch route is so simple. But the one thing I'd like to kind of add, and actually, do you know what? For years, I've been making a corn and oil for years, and for years, I've not actually referred to the back of the bottle because for some unknown reason, I've just always assumed it had bitters in it. And it's not because of Martin Kate in Smuggler's Cove, but his recipe does call for 2 to 4 dashes of Angostura bitters. Now, just very quickly before I show you how to make this drink, and I'm going to make it with and without the bitters, but for Sunday, just so you've got a rough idea of what I'm going to do with this cocktail, because we've got 3 ingredients, so it means we can dissect 3 different things. I'm going to dissect the rum different ways. If I'm right in thinking, I've actually got 3 different Falernums in here, so not all Falernums taste the same. So I've got 3 different Falernums, but I've also, as you probably know, got plenty of different bitters here as well. So I'm going to go in a 3-way deconstruction on Sunday, so don't miss that. So let's crack on and make it. And I'm really sorry, Foursquare, Richard Seal. I'm only using that because I literally do not have enough RL Seal 10 to make this cocktail in there, and I don't want to use the rest of it. I kind of want to sip on that, and I really don't like the XO, which you kind of recommend on there. The sort of like more heavily aged sherry rum. So I'm actually going Mount Gay. I could use Dawley's 12-year-old, but I'm actually going Mount Gay Black Barrel. So 60 ml, 2 ounces of Barbados rum. And then it's 15 ml, ½ an ounce of your John D. Taylor's Velvet Falernum. Now, I've actually heard two conflicting stories here as well, because first off, it's printed, and Martin Cate claims to have done the kind of research on this, that actually it was crushed ice that they used back in those days. They kind of had some ice, smacked it up and put it back in, put it in the cocktail. They prefer to make it with crushed ice. But I've actually heard certain people talk about this, that actually it was never served with ice. I'm going to split the difference. I've got smaller ice cubes that I'm going to use in here. So there we go, the most basic version of the corn and oil done. Just literally Barbados rum, velvet falernum, stirred down with a bit of ice. Absolutely delicious. I really, really like that. And I always have. It's why I've kind of got different, or kind of always got a falernum here, because it's just such an easy drink. To really dumb it down, is essentially kind of like a rum fashioned. You know, you would probably use plain sugar in a rum fashioned. Well, instead you're using falernum. That's all it really is. Now, bearing in mind I've had a couple of gulps out of that, I'm just going to experiment with the bitters. So I'm going to do this. I really like it at the moment. I'm going to start off with one dash. There we go. We'll give that a very quick stir. One dash adds just a tiny little bit of complexity. Doesn't ruin that at all. I think I might actually be craving a second dash. Oh, now that's interesting, because now, it's probably because I've had a couple of glugs, but now that's actually gone a little bit too far. I dare say 2 dashes for me on a full drink would have been about spot on. But that, I think it does need the dashes of Angostura bitters. Let's just face it, it's a falernum rum fashioned, but it's flipping tasty. And don't forget to join me on Sunday night, because we are going to take this cocktail to bits. We're going to be looking at the rums, the falernums, the bitters, and we're going to have a bit of fun. I'll see you then.